Today's event is meant to give you some learning and insights into an emerging legal tech industry that's already breaking boundaries and will also probably transform the legal industry sooner or later. I'm sure this session is interesting for many of you here. Let me introduce you. The person who's going to run the event today is Rachel Petha. She's a senior advisor at the Sovereign Wealth Fund Institute. She's a qualified investment professional, television news anchor, CFA charter holder, chartered treasurer, member of Mensa, and also a published author. That's a lot, Rachel. Anyways, since 2016, Rachel has been a senior advisor to the Sovereign Wealth Fund Institute. It's a global data and intelligence business focusing on institutional investors. She is also a senior advisor at Skybridge Capital, a global investment management firm that's focused on alternative investments. Rachel has been in the region since 2008, spending a decade at Mubadala Investment Company, which is one of the region's largest sovereign wealth funds, helping them with their capital markets and treasury team. She managed the asset and liability committee of Mubadala GE Capital, focusing on interest rate, foreign exchange, and cash flow risk. She's a CFA charter holder and a chartered treasurer. In 2014, the Association of Corporate Treasurers named Rachel as the one to watch in Treasury. In 2009, she published her first book, General Prints on the Globe, and helped establish a charity called Aspire that so that sales proceeds could go towards supporting young entrepreneurship. So she's going to manage this event going forward. So over to her, Rachel, and this is your event. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Raju, and that's a really great initiative that you have as well regarding empowering women entrepreneurs. And thanks again to TiE for hosting this webinar today on Is Legaltech Breaking Boundaries and the Way Law Works? Now, Raju, in his introduction, he mentioned about breaking boundaries, and we have such a stellar panel today, so I'm really excited. They are all boundary breakers in their own right. So before I hand over to introduce them, I will also introduce my co-moderator, who is Dilip Masand, who's the co-founder and CEO of Phoenix Advisors. And joining me on today's panel, we have Jamie Levy, who's the General Counsel at the Abu Dhabi Investment Office. We have Dr. Mimi Zhu, co-founder of Oxford Deep Tech Resolution Lab. And we have Rishikesh Datta, the CEO of Legaltech.com. So I will hand over to the panelists to introduce themselves, but we would just like to do a quick audience poll just so that we can gauge the composition of our audience today. So first poll, what best fits your profile? And please do scroll down because there is a second part to this question, which is which industry best fits your profile? And just as you're responding to this, a little bit about today's format. It's going to be a really interactive discussion between the panelists. And we also encourage questions from the audience as we go. So please do submit your questions. I'm sure everyone is very familiar with Zoom by now, 6 months into this pandemic, but just in case you're not, there's a Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen. So please submit your questions this way. So as we're waiting for all the answers to come in, it does look as though the majority of our participants today are either entrepreneurs or startups or small, medium businesses, which is great to see. And we've got over 50% from the legal industry or consulting and services. And I guess what's really interesting about this and what I find fascinating about legal tech is that law really does touch all of us. You know, we've all used lawyers at some point or legal services, and I will dive into some of these things a bit later. Okay, so final results, we do have almost 50% are entrepreneurs or startups, and then 43% small, medium businesses, with 30% from the legal industry, 17% from technology, and about a quarter, 26%, from consulting or services background. So I'd now like to briefly hand over to Dilip Masand, my co-presenter on today's webinar, and he'll just give a very quick overview and some of the statistics in the legal tech industry. Over to you, Dilip.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I will definitely do my best to be quick. But before I do that, I just want to say a few things about why we're here and frame this a little bit. So I've been a member of TiE since 1998, and I joined in New York, and that was sort of I would say the dot-com boom and Internet 1.0. And that time we had a venture fund and an incubator in New York City, and everything was so hyped up in Internet 1.0. It was the first time all of us had lived in a bubble. No one knew the bubble would burst. And a bubble burst, and then you live through other bubbles. And now here we are 20 plus years later. We are based in the UAE. Our investment thesis is around the legal industry. And while some of it is quite mature in terms of things we do in disputes and litigation funding, as of late, we've been hearing about legal tech. And we've really been trying to understand this sector. And frankly, we don't want to repeat mistakes of, is it a bubble, if we get exposed to this. So the idea was, let's bring some of our friends together who are thought leaders, and let's do what we would do is gather a brain trust. And let's learn about this, let's understand it, and let's see how viable this industry is. And I think today we've got a stellar panel. So I'm just going to share a couple of slides that our team in India put together on this sector. So I hope you can see this, and so if you look at this, obviously an emerging global legal tech community, which provides legal services. What's interesting is that you actually have incubators and accelerators opening around the globe. And you have venture capital firms like Khosla Ventures in Silicon Valley, Y Combinator, FTV Capital, who some might call the fathers of fintech, have just made a significant investment in legal tech. You've got litigation funders like Ethereum, and you've got stellar VCs like Peter Thiel, who have all started investing in this sector. We also looked at a report dated at the end of 2019 that said there are almost 3,000 companies offering legal tech services. And by the end of that year, 614 companies had been funded, and it was a total of about $4.6 billion. These are some of the data points from that same report. And in that, they covered almost 3,000 companies. Again, 614 were funded, 26 were mega companies, 4.6 billion in funding, one unicorn. This I thought was really interesting, Soonicorns, and we'd have to look back and see how the pandemic affected those. Silicon Valley always comes up with things you've never heard of before, mini-corns. 13 were part of IPOs, 163 were acquisition exits, and 304 were dead pools. So that means companies that died by the wayside. Let me go to the next slide. Again, if you look at the growth and investment in this sector, by the end of 2019, it was hovering right around 1.2 or 1.3 billion. And now if we look at it from a global level, you can see that the compounded annual growth rate of legal tech companies has shown a 23% increase in funding. The sector has become very attractive. Within the sector, investors are focused on contract management, e-discovery, and legal practice management, intellectual property, and the delivery of forms and use of automated forms has been growing. And yes, certainly the larger players are in the US and Europe. But what I found really interesting is when you looked across the globe, you saw US, Europe, Israel, India. And when you looked at the top companies in India, one of our panelists, Rishikesh and Vakil Search, are among the top companies in India. So that is some of the data our team pulled, and I think it would be great to hear from our esteemed panelists as to their view on this industry and what they are doing to move it forward.
Thanks so much, Dilip. So panelists, thank you for your patience, and thank you so much for joining us today as well. I mean, as Dilip mentioned, it really is a world-class panel of thought leaders and friends as well. So thank you so much for giving your time today. If we can just start off by having each panelist introduce themselves for the benefit of the audience. Mimi, ladies first, perhaps we start with you.
Sure, great. So hello everybody, my name is Mimi Zhou. I'm the co-founder of the Deep Tech Dispute Resolution Lab at Oxford University. I'm a professor of law and I am a practicing lawyer as well in the UK. So I not only undertake research in legal tech and innovation, particularly in civil and commercial dispute resolution, which is my area of specialization. I also teach it to my students. So I think very much looking forward to contributing to this forum from both a researcher, teacher, and a practitioner perspective.
Excellent, thanks Mimi. And Rishikesh, you're next on my screen, so could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Rachel. My name is Rishikesh Datar. I run a company called vakilsearch.com. We are humbled to be India's largest legal tax and compliance platform. We are building in India for the world in some sense. So what we do is we help businesses with cradle to nirvana support in terms of setting up, getting compliant, filing taxes, getting their intellectual property protected, and as things evolve, also raising funding and so on and so forth. So we act as an operating system, if you will, for small business owners to get all of their legal tax and compliance work handled. And I think like Dr. Mimi said, really looking forward to the questions and a very interactive session.
Great, thank you Rishikesh. And Jamie, please introduce yourself for the audience.
Thanks very much, Rachel. Thanks very much to TiE. I'm Jamie Levy. I'm the General Counsel of Abu Dhabi Investment Office. Prior to joining Abu Dhabi Investment Office, I was a partner at KPMG and led the New Law platform in Australia, looking at disrupting legal services from the Big Four's perspective. I've been a General Counsel at Mubadala investment company in Abu Dhabi for many years, serving alongside Rachel, and prior to that a private equity fund formation lawyer and entrepreneur. Very much looking forward to the discussion today and hopefully bring a couple of different perspectives into the frame. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks Jamie. And yeah, we really do have a variety of perspectives on the panel today, so we hope that we have some good discussion. Perhaps we can sort of start by looking, industries across the world are being disrupted by technology. What areas of law do you think benefit most from being digitized, and what are some of the problems that tech can solve? Mimi, perhaps we start with you again on that one.
Sure. I'm going to pick my pet interest, which is on dispute resolution, and in the context of access to justice. I think certainly the disruptions brought along by COVID-19 have seen, at least temporarily, I would say a slight acceleration of the efforts made by various courts around the world to go digital and to at least introduce remote hearings. Still a slow process, I think, maybe compared to other areas of legal tech, but certainly this is one area where I think there's a lot of significant potential to really transform the way that our justice system is delivered to the people. So in that sense, it really has a huge impact on everyone's lives. So I think ODR, whether it's in the court context, so going online partially or entirely in a court setting, or perhaps private providers of ODR, online dispute resolution, I think this area is on the rise, and hopefully the changes we have seen during the pandemic will continue. Some people are skeptical, but I'm always an optimist. So I think certainly people realize how easy it is once you've got the right technical infrastructure and also the design of the system. And when I say design, it's not just about the technical design, it's also about the legal design, how easy it is and how accessible it is for users to navigate the system, to use the system and achieve an outcome quickly and efficiently with as few pain points in the process as possible.
That's great. Thanks, Mimi. And I will come back to some of those points raised about the stickiness of the changes that we've seen during COVID as well. And Jamie, we had a discussion a couple of days ago and you were talking about access to justice for all as well. Perhaps you could build on Mimi's points that she made regarding that.
Yeah, sure. I think if we kind of step back for a moment and look at what's happening in the legal tech and legal industry space and look more at a macro area of what's happening in industry and commerce, we see tremendous change being brought on by technology. And the law is not at all able to hide from the progression that is being experienced across professional services in all other fields and is a laggard in just about every way. So we're at the dawn of a 20-year transformation. And when we look at access to finance, which a large number of fintech companies focused on micropayments and access to financial systems are focused on solve, have a tremendous trying to provide access to a legal system to the majority of the world's population that can't pick the phone up or access a lawyer. So for those people who can't, legal tech is aimed at in many ways one pillar of legal tech, which is quite altruistic and progressive and brings access to justice to the doorstep of the majority, which currently doesn't really exist for many parts of the world.
Thanks for that, Jamie. Rishikesh, I think it'd be interesting for us to hear your perspective as to who benefits from legal tech. You're working with a lot of SMEs, is this a cost savings and efficiency saving? And, how has business been during COVID-19, frankly?
Right. So thanks, Dilip. While Dr. Mimi and Jamie's points are well taken, that access to justice is going to get transformed with legal tech, from the lens where we are sitting, from right here in India, if you look at the problems that are on the ground, we have 1.3 billion people, we have 63 million businesses which need legal tax and compliance support to not just survive, not just thrive, but even survive. Right? So in terms of what legal tech is doing at a very real level on the ground, it's helping these businesses get access to basic information. Now, one of the things that the small businesses are deprived of is access to the kind of legal information that a large corporate or a large enterprise would have. And that typically results in these companies paying a heavy penalty in terms of non-compliance. They're unable to raise capital. They're unable to scale the business. They're unable to attract the right kind of talent. So legal tech actually has a very tangible impact on the economy itself. By creating a transparent platform where any business, regardless of size, can get access to information and can get completely compliant. I think that's one of the biggest advantages, and that's going to be, in my perspective, the single largest disruption that legal tech is going to have, at least in India and many other emerging markets. As far as the COVID pandemic is concerned, it's been obviously hugely disruptive, along with America. And I think in the United Kingdom, India is one of the most badly affected economies in the world because of the pandemic. In this scenario, the entire world is shifting online. And what we have seen in the last 4 months has been a 25% month-on-month growth. So as a legal tech company, I think Vakil Search has done really well in the pandemic because the entire economy, the entire market is shifting online. The economy and small businesses obviously have been completely battered. So we'll have to wait and watch what the recovery curve looks like. But it has unwittingly been an impetus for legal tech in this country. So COVID-19 for legal tech has been positive, but for the economy as a whole, it's been very negative.
Mimi, I'm wondering, we just heard from Rishikesh from an Indian perspective about the opportunity. I know you do a lot of work with China and what's going on there in ODR, et cetera. Is there similar migration, and has that been affected by this current pandemic? It'd be really interesting to hear from your perspective what legal tech is in China as well now, and where that's going.
Sure. I might just focus on courts and the digitalization of justice in China, because that's the area I know most familiar with. I could give you a lecture, which is not what you want, on legal tech generally in China. But I think given the points that have been raised so far, it's very interesting to see how, this is the biggest country in the world, and arguably the most technologically advanced, perhaps along with the US, but let's not go into the geopolitics. But what China has done in its courts has actually established a framework, not just in terms of infrastructure, but also a regulatory framework and policy framework to support the digitalization of justice. And that is actually part of the judicial reforms to make the courts in China more transparent and more accountable. So that's slightly different context in terms of a policy context compared to perhaps other digital reforms that are going on in, say, the courts of UK, where I am currently, where certainly access to justice is certainly one of the primary drives for UK courts reforms in this area. So China, I think what is marvelous about what they have been doing is, even before the pandemic, for the last 5 to 6 years, they have set up this framework, this technical infrastructure, but also this policy regulatory framework that from the top down directs pretty much every judge, every court in its system to deploy new technologies. I'm very good friends with the director of the Information and Technology Center in the Supreme People's Court of China. I have seen firsthand just how centralized and how advanced that technology is. I mean, this is a country that deals with 22 million cases a year, 22 million cases a year. And so, yes, it is the biggest country in the world, but I mean, in terms of the number of judges, the ratio of judges to cases, on average, if you're a lower level court judge, you would be dealing with about 250, 300 cases a year. So it is for this reason that, even before the pandemic, China has really sought to address the digitalization of judicial services very quickly, very rapidly, and it can because of the system that it is in. So we see that this is actually a transformation of courts, which we have yet to see, I think, in other jurisdictions. Again, I think the worry is whether we just kind of go digital just for the sake of going digital, or actually are we moving sort of from a traditional kind of concept of a courtroom, not just in terms of its physical brick and mortar form, but actually transforming the civil procedures that come with it, to transform the policy and regulatory frameworks that come with it. And so I think there's obviously lessons we can learn from what the Chinese have been doing. But again, I always have to emphasize that, it is often challenging to do what they do, given also the very significant differences in legal and political systems around the world.
And what I find, interesting when you're looking at legal tech is, it's so closely tied to, I guess, regulation and compliance. And sometimes this almost drives to the commercial opportunity, as it were, like changing compliance, changing regulations. Well, I think, Jamie, we were discussing the other day about the Volcker rule and how that sort of spurred on perhaps a really big commercial opportunity in legal tech. Could you maybe talk a bit more about how that would play into AI and machine learning in the legal tech space?
Yeah, sure.
And look, to pick up on what Mimi was saying there, I think we are already seeing the impact of automation, document ingestion, and artificial intelligence in the administration of law. So I'll pick up on the commercial side in a moment, but really do agree there with Mimi that when we look at what's happening in the US court legal system at the moment around the use of artificial intelligence and technology to support judges quick, scalable basis, you end up with a more efficient legal system that is hopefully grounded in technology and ethical principles and legal principles that give the right judicial outcome to the cases that they seek. That I think also provides a huge area, which I'm not sure we've got time to talk about today, around ethics in legal tech, and whether or not you'd be comfortable as a plaintiff or a defendant in a case, knowing that you've got a robo-judge potentially feeding into your future. And there's a lot of people out there that actually say, I'd be more comfortable knowing that bias is perhaps taken to a degree out of the system, where we've got a robo-judge in play versus a human, but then we look also through the basis of the data and the principles that the data is grounded in to determine, is the system itself in the future, and at this point going to be grounded in a degree of bias given the originators of the technology solutions that will drive the legal profession and those kind of systems. And those systems are also being leveraged in the commercial space. And we look at big insurance companies at the moment and how they come to very quickly be able to make decisions as to whether to make a payout on a claim through automation technology and determining on the basis of the facts, whether or not they're liable and ought to make a decision. And the level of processing of claims below certain thresholds is now being done in below a second for some of the largest insurance companies in the world through digital solutions and automation solutions. So I think on the administration of justice side, just as you see in the kind of, look at the medical profession, you see, surgeons working with machines, working with robots to perform complex surgery. You now see a way to provide, an outcome in respect of the administration of our profession and justice. For those on the call who are the entrepreneurs and the SMEs and looking at, what does this mean for them? I think, in the commercial sense, there's never been a more exciting time to either practice law or be able to get access to, fantastic lawyers, under new commercial models. The law's been a space, where privileged law firms who for many years have not been able to market services because of the laws and regulations that govern the provision of legal services, have now moved into an era where a good lawyer with a laptop's much better and provides greater access to legal outcomes and advice than a mid law firm 10 years ago. The access to technology solutions provides for different business models as well. Very hard to tell a law firm where most good law firms are operating at a greater than kind of 50% profit margin that they've got broken business models. When if you look at the reality of how these commercial business models are in operation, you've got a scenario where there's a lot of fat in the system. And that fat is at the end of the day being borne by the SMEs and the consumers. And the fact is, just like in the fintech space looking to disrupt finance, you've got, and which has successfully done so in many states and make the world's largest financial institutions really take note of those that don't have large balance sheet being able to take on board significant customer bases to provide lending solutions. You've got a scenario now where legal tech-driven and digital technology service-driven firms are able to challenge the traditional stakeholders and the traditional leaders in the sector by virtue of being forward-thinking and not being a business based on charging in 6-minute increments or the weight of paper, which wasn't so long ago. For many SMEs, they'll be able to access documentation, be able to automate sales agreements, be able to take the legal operation side of what was and has been for many years a very inefficient system that's rewarded by inefficiency in the manner in which clients pay fees. based on how much time it takes. And that whole challenge to time that's being brought by technology and automation solutions, I think, will deliver and continue to deliver technology dividends to clients. And those clients who don't demand it now will be demanding it, and many are already demanding to know, how will you use as a legal professional technology to ensure I get the best advice from the best lawyer using the right technology that ensures, I can get across as much of the documentation as I can. I produce the documentation through an automated sense, using machine learning and natural language processing technologies to review documentation and to ensure that, we're not lawyering like we did 10 years or 50 years ago. And really that requires, a new mindset for a lot of the lawyers, which we're seeing come through in the manner in which lawyers are now educated through universities and how tech savvy lawyers have to be today. I mean, my first piece of legal tech was probably a dictaphone, 20 years ago. And if I look at, what I do now and what I demand of lawyers, and you mentioned the Volcker rule there, and the example I gave you the other day, you've got scenarios now where people come with just impossible problems. I come to my lawyers with impossible problems. Review, and in that scenario, it was millions of pages of documentation for leading regulatory authorities worldwide, and lawyers and accountants, tax consultants, scratch their heads saying, how are we going to solve that kind of a problem? And now we actually have built solutions where document ingestion machines can ingest millions of pages, discern issues, automate issues lists, automate documentation, provide data analytics overlays, and help you understand where the issues are. And I think from a compliance perspective, where you mentioned earlier as well, that kind of document review tool, which sounds kind of sci-fi in the future, is here now. And if we're not utilizing that in the context of the new digital economy that's emerged, globally, then the law's even further disconnected from the reality of commerce. And my view is that the digital world, the digital economy must be supported by the right legal frameworks, lawyers, and technology solutions to allow for efficiency in the system. And if one is so disconnected from the other, then you've got a break in the system. And what we're trying to do, I think, in legal tech at the moment on the commercial side is to ensure that the legal operations that we see within the administration of and provision of legal services, together with the commercial models for delivering on legal services, actually are forced to and thrust into the current digital economy, availing of Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, automation solutions, and in doing so provide for a great new world of opportunity for lawyers and entrepreneurs in respective legal services.
I think those 50% of people on the call that were SMEs, it will be music to their ears that the 6-minute billing model is going out the door, that's for sure. I know, Dilip, you've just unmuted yourself, so I think you have a question too, but if I could just ask Rishikesh, Jamie mentioned machine learning and AI as a provider of legal tech services. How are you using them within your business?
Right. So I think the first thing that we need to keep in mind is how we define legal tech. So if we define legal tech as something which makes a lawyer's life simpler, then by that sort of broad definition, even an Excel spreadsheet is legal tech. And even Microsoft Word is legal tech, right? So the important thing for the purpose of this conversation is to not define legal tech too broadly, but to narrow it down to that level of disruptive innovation, which is going to take the legal industry to the next level. Right? So I think Dr. Mimi spoke about online dispute resolution, which is a very classic example of how AI and machine learning is going to replicate how a human being would think and how a human being would resolve a dispute. So to come to your question for a minute, Rachel, how are we using machine learning? I think the biggest use case for machine learning at Vakil Search is in automation. So what machine learning does, for the benefit of those who might not have heard the term being used very often, is in very simple English, machine learning helps to train a machine to do a repetitive task with a basic level of logic and some algorithms built into it. Right? So machine learning is basically helping a machine do repetitive tasks in a systematic and highly efficient way. Artificial intelligence adds a layer of what we would call human thought. right? So the ability to choose between outcomes and then decide what outcome fits the particular situation best. So to give you some examples of how we use machine learning and AI, trademark registration, trademark filing, for example, which is a big business case. A lot of Indian companies now want to protect their brand. They want to protect either their trademark or their copyright or their patent, and they want to make sure that they get certified quickly. Right? How do we help millions of businesses do trademark filing at scale? So what we have done is we have built a bot which will basically collect all the information, do a trademark search online in a matter of a few seconds, then prepare a trademark. There are a couple of forms which we need to file in India. So basically prepare those forms and then log into the trademark portal. All of this happens without a single human being's click. Right? Log into the trademark portal, update information, make the required government payments, the fee payments, and then submit the application. So while a human being would take close to an hour to file one trademark application, the bot can simultaneously file multiple applications in seconds. That's a combination of machine learning, some amount of artificial intelligence, and of course, computer vision, natural language processing, and basic automation. It's called robotic process automation. So it's a bunch of things coming together, which is transforming, sort of taking legal to the next level. So this is one example of how it can be done. It can be done just as well for tax filing. It can be done very well for setting up a business. It can be done for drafting a document or a contract. It can be done for reviewing a contract. So all of the things which SMEs would have to, like Jamie mentioned, pay lawyers in 6-minute increments for, can now be done with a highly sophisticated platform at a very small fraction of what an SME would pay.
And then I think, and just sort of building on that point, and Mimi and Jamie have touched on it as well, how do you take the bias out of that system? So when there are objections to sort of standard applications, how do you manage that? And I guess that also comes to the robo-judge point. How do you manage contestation against claims?
I'm going to take Mimi's point and keep the geopolitics out of it. But my personal opinion is that you can only have a robo-judge in a free market, in a free economy, right? Where there's free press and there is actually checks and balances in the system. So if you have a centralized state which is sort of controlling everything, and you also have the robo-judge created by the state to resolve disputes where the state is involved, right? Then the possibility of bias is extremely high, to the point where me as a citizen, I would not trust the robo-judge. On the other hand, if you have an independent, free-thinking judiciary, then yes, theoretically, a robo-judge would be a huge asset. India as a country has, while there's been a lot of private innovation in legal tech, on the regulatory, on the government side, we are seeing that the system moves a little too slowly. We don't have the kind of innovation in justice delivery as we would like to have. There are some green shoots now in the pandemic, but I think there's some way away from that. I think a robo-judge would be phenomenal for things like consumer disputes, like disputes between a consumer and a company, or a very standardized situation of a check bouncing, right? You give somebody a check and it bounces. So when you have the basic documentation in place and it's a binary problem in some sense, like did you lend this person money or not, right? Or did you buy this product or not? For all of those cases, which from a volumetric standpoint is a good 20-30% of the entire case backlog in most countries, I think a robo-judge would be a great innovation. As you go up the difficulty scale or difficulty index, then especially where the government is involved, then a robo-judge, I think we are a few years away from it. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I think we're a few years away from that. But I just want to add here that we are very focused on the business and SME space. I think Dr. Mimi is far more qualified to give you the nuances of how legal tech is working for AI than I am.
No, I thought that was very good. Very nicely put.
Thank you for that, Rishikesh. I wanted to back up a little bit, Mimi, and ask you, based on some of the things Jamie said, when he was talking about, lawyers needing new skills, new opportunities. We have an audience of entrepreneurs. And you're in a faculty of law, you've got the Deep Tech Dispute Resolution Lab. I'm curious, the students that you are working with, are they looking for new skills? Are they looking at the law now as an entrepreneurial area? Are they working on projects there that may, come out and become actual businesses? If you could maybe shed some light and your thoughts on that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally inspired by my students. Just really, I feel like I wish I was 20 again. You know, the pace at which they pick this up is just amazing. You know, I've been trying to learn more programming and get my head around, you know, the more technical aspects of legal tech. I certainly am the legal side of legal tech in the projects that I've been involved in. But I can talk to obviously the computer scientists, and we have a number of these computer scientists in our lab. It's hard though, it's really hard. I mean, I just give you an example. We were talking earlier this week in our weekly stand-ups about a project, and the lawyers just talked. And then I said to the computer scientist, how much of that did you actually understand? And the computer scientists are usually a bit quieter, so they don't actually say, I'm sorry, I actually don't understand. And it was just silence. And I was like, all right, let's go back to step one. You know, okay, all right, what does this legal concept mean? And so I think, at least in our lab, I'm trying to run an experiment in terms of seeing how we can get different disciplines to talk to each other. Because I think the truly amazing synergies that we see, the most successful legal tech businesses out there, are those that really are able to maximize the full potential of people from different backgrounds. And so that's what I've been trying to encourage my students. Unfortunately, our curriculum is much more behind. That we can say that also about law and regulation, as technology, you know, is accelerating exponentially. Unfortunately, particularly in a place like Oxford, our curriculum is still, in many ways, reflects the length of the history and tradition that you know, our institution is known for. But we are trying to have these new kind of academic and industry ventures where I partner with organizations and startups, government bodies, to try and deliver projects that are multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholder. And the students are very excited. And I think that's where my hope is in this next generation of lawyers, but also, you know, students from other disciplines who are interested in law, legal tech, and hopefully that will make the difference.
Great, thanks, Mimi. We have had a couple of audience questions come in, and one of them sort of more focused on the commercial side and the competitive landscape. I'd just like to actually also ask a polling question from the audience. Cicely, if you could please release the last question on would you invest in a legal tech company? And this sort of ties into one of the questions that we've had from the audience as well. So we have yes, it sounds promising. No, the industry is too new. Maybe I would wait and watch for later, or I don't know. Well, that's good. As the answers are coming in, it looks like the panelists have managed to convince the audience that yes, it does sound promising. So that's great. While the answers are coming in, I'd like to address one of the questions from the audience from Klaus. Thanks for your question, Klaus. So in Dilip's intro slides, he referred to Peter Thiel as an investor in tech. However, Peter has become well known for saying competition is for losers, and he also appears to be recommending startups to aim at being monopolies. How does that, in your view, and this is for all the panelists, sit with currently existing laws, e.g. antitrust to stimulate competition? Would you see conflict of interest arising if investors in legal tech are actually encouraging or suggesting to ignore or bypass existing laws? Sorry, that's a long question, but who would like to tackle that one from Klaus?
I think I'll take that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give you my personal opinion. So I don't think that any market economy should have competition law, at least the kind of competition law that we're seeing increasingly growing, right, in these countries. So it's just a way to stifle competition. Ultimately, the market always wins. So if you provide a product that can satisfy a consumer's needs at the right price, the consumer is going to opt for the product. So I think competition law is an unfortunate intersection of the regulatory landscape with business. I think the regulatory structure and businesses have to be kept separate. Businesses have to be allowed to thrive. And yes, I don't think in any real market, in any market as new as legal tech anyway, we're going to see any real monopolies for a while. I think legal tech is going to continue to be extremely competitive, and that's a good thing. We're going to see a lot of young companies getting into this space, aggressively competing for market share. Some companies are going to get larger than the others. That's obvious. That's the law of the farm. But I don't think we're really going to see any monopolies. And if any investor is going to encourage his company to be a monopoly, that's obvious. That's the obvious competitive thrust which an investor is going to push a company to go ahead and achieve and dominate the market. But domination is not the same thing as a monopoly. So I think that investor push to dominate markets is always going to be there. Legal tech is no exception. But it's not going to hurt the industry. It's going to really help the industry. Because the moment you have two people trying to dominate the market together, then great outcomes come out of it. Right? Great, better prices, better quality, better technology, more investments. And then it becomes a virtuous cycle where things just keep getting better.
And Rachel, I'll give you a slightly different view on that one as well. When you look at, I think, trying to create a monopoly, what I like about the sentiment there is trying to find a solution to a problem that no one else has solved, trying to carve out a swim lane, and a business model that addresses a significant market opportunity that is unoccupied. And that's a tremendous opportunity for an investor, to come in and take an interest in at an early stage. I think the reality at the moment for $1 trillion industry like the law, with at least my last read of around $16 billion in dry powder in private equity funds and others looking at technology-led solutions and investment, not necessarily just in law, but in new business models driven by traditional service offerings, and law absolutely fits into the kind of investment criteria of those funds. You've got a great opportunity to see the right businesses attacking the right problems come out with business models that can be scalable and create great investment opportunities for investors. But at the same time, if people are looking for creating a monopoly and or trying to create something where nobody is, there might be a reason nobody's in that space. I've recently had, a legal tech firm call me, and I get it regularly. Can we talk to you about a particular, legal tech, piece of kit that you might like to see, Jamie? I'll say yes to, some of these, where I've got an interest. And one of them actually, was looking at trying to help me understand where my WIP is, that's the work in progress within a law firm, to understand my budget implications and legal procurement needs, to try to better manage cash flow, which is obviously one of the kind of front of mind issues for CEOs and CFOs, drive efficiency into the business, including with respect to traditional cost centers in a business, one of which is the legal budget. So any legal tech company that comes to a CFO and says, hey, how I give you an idea to halve your legal external legal spend, generally is going to be met with an interest from a lot of players and a lot of companies, particularly those with legal budgets in excess of $10 million, of which there are many in the world. It could be US. You've got many large organisations with a legal budget of more than $70 million. So there are, I think, some great opportunities there. But if, and going back to that example briefly, the whole tech piece and play was about trying to tell me as a general counsel where my WIP is in a law firm context, telling me basically what's on the clock and what could I potentially be up to paying. I don't really care what the WIP is. The firm can be as inefficient as it likes. I'm going to pay what I agree in the engagement letter to pay. And the fact that there's a piece of legal tech that might tell me where they're about to go over on the budget that we've agreed, is useful for them to help manage my expectations. But as an end user, I'm the wrong consumer for that particular product. And from a legal tech perspective, the law firm has got better legal procurement tools than that specific point product. So we end up then in a kind of, I think, really interesting scenario that we are today, which is, which point products are actually winners in and of themselves, and which are going to be failing companies, which will result in consolidation opportunities for the Thomson Reuters of the world to come in and mop up a whole lot of businesses which created some value for someone at some point, but didn't have a business model that actually worked in the new economy that we have, the new propositions that we have presented to us from the post-COVID world. And I think we'll see a lot of consolidation in this space. Some winners, many losers. And to Dilip's earlier point around, bubbles, I don't see this as a bubble at all at this stage. I noted with interest the M&A, stat that you put there, Dilip. There's a very limited number of exits in that 168 number at this point. There'll be plenty of write-offs and write-downs in those investments as well, but there'll be some tremendous winners in the trillion-dollar industry that hasn't really had a technical basis.
Thanks for that, Jamie. I have to ask you, and please, Mimi, Rishikesh, feel free to jump in. We've heard about, and we see what is happening in India. We see the volume of the legal tech industry. Mimi's given us some insight into really the use of robo-judges in the courts. We know what she's doing in the academic world and what they're trying to do at Oxford. What do you see in the region? Here we are, this is TiE Dubai, we're in the Middle East. We've got quite an entrepreneurial audience. Do you think there is scope for this in the region? Is it too early? Are we still at stage one of fintech? This comes next, et cetera?
Look, I'll give you a kind of frame through which I look at that kind of issue through at the moment. I think firstly, we live in a global world, and I think it's very difficult now to discern regional issues from global issues. Digital trade and international trade is such that the region's always been and will be a fantastic time zone and a geographically located place for tremendous amounts of international trade to go through. But big players in the world expect business models to be done in a manner that's most efficient, and we don't exclude, I think, the Middle East and the region from the opportunities that presents, all the requirements that those firms and organizations have and demands they have, as well as their supply chains. So I think from a regional perspective, we're seeing organizations embrace technology solutions. They don't care whether we call it legal tech or not. They want automation. They want to understand data analytics and how what its implications are for services, for supply chains, and for international and digital trade. And a lot of that then simply requires the pillars of services, one of which is legal services, that underpins and delivers delivers on the promises of these industries to be robust and available to them. So legal tech in the industry itself, as it applies to the region, I think is it's early stage for the region, but absolutely will come along with the rest of the world when it comes to its level of enthusiasm for and take up of technology solutions, particularly I see in the automation space. I think secondly, look at the Abu Dhabi global markets and the world's first digital courts that are sitting there at the ADGM in Al Maria Island, and you've got a world-class jurisdiction driven by digital solutions, fully automated, combining the best legal minds in the world with the right technology solutions to focus on outcomes and justice in a traditional sense. And I think that's an incredibly inspiring outcome for Abu Dhabi, one which obviously is a credit to the leadership of Abu Dhabi. And you see there that's a leading, world-class leading jurisdiction driven by the digital court. So when we look at it through that lens as well, I'm inspired, and to use Dr. Mimi's words too, very optimistic around what legal tech implications there are for trade and commerce in the region.
So Mimi, Rishikesh, that was clearly an open invitation from Jamie for you to come to Abu Dhabi, come to the region, and help him grasp that opportunity that he himself is defining here.
Sure, absolutely. When the pandemic's over, I'm on the first flight there.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Around that.
Yeah, and Dilip and I are both tenants of ADGM, and certainly the work that they're doing and the Abu Dhabi Investment Office is doing in general for the entrepreneurial ecosystem is really great. As usual, the time has gone extremely fast, and we're actually already over time. But I would like to ask one closing question to the panelists, and that is, what is sort of your prediction or hope for the future of legal tech over the next, say, 5 years? And Rishikesh, your microphone is unmuted, so you can go first.
Sure, Rachel, thanks. So I think that what's going to happen in legal tech is that you're going to see a lot of synergies being built with other areas of technology like fintech, for example. So a lot of what is happening in fintech, specifically around automation, around robotic processes, around machine learning, computer vision, all of those things are going to get absorbed into legal tech as well. So legal tech is going to sort of ride the wave, is the way I look at it. And I know, like Jamie and Dr. Mimi, I'm extremely optimistic about what's going to happen in the next 3-4 years. Sitting where I'm sitting, especially in markets like India and emerging markets where there's a sort of hunger to grow and hunger to sort of expand and go to the next level, I think legal tech is going to really add impetus. It's going to be a tailwind. And in that sense, it's going to benefit from not just other areas of engineering, but also from the markets sort of gravitating towards technology for delivery of services. So for both of those reasons, I think that the next 5 years are going to be very, very exciting.
Thanks, Rishikesh. Mimi?
I think my vision, would be that it will make the legal system and how people interact with the law on a day-to-day basis better, just to put it like that. So there will always be a need. So I think there's always a need. This industry is here to stay.
Yeah, it certainly does affect everyone. And Jamie, your prediction or hope for the next 5 years?
Look, I think it will present tremendous opportunity to those who are positioning themselves to be able to take advantage of it. I think it will change the way lawyers are educated. It will change the way law firms are structured. It will change the number of job opportunities that there are in the law. When I went through university to be a lawyer, I was able to study law to be a lawyer. I think now you've got data scientists that would like to specialize in the area of law. You've got legal operations specialists. You've got administration folk who are going to be at the tip of the spear when it comes to the delivery of either legal services or the provision of them if you're in-house. And I think we'll see a huge take up in automation solutions and contract automation and document review technologies emerge that will be applied from the area of e-discovery into the commercial application world. But 5 years is a tremendously long period of time for where we are right now. But if you look at it in the context of 100 years of almost no change in the legal profession, I think 5 years you'll see massive amounts of digitization that really just follow what 2/3 of the world's CEOs are demanding in any event, that legal services become more efficient, that we look at the law as part of an ecosystem that is on a digital transformation journey itself, and we'll see some huge winners in this scenario, many of whom we've not yet heard of today.
Fabulous. Thank you, Jamie. And yes, you're right. 5 years was perhaps a bit too long a time frame for an area that's changing as quickly as this. A couple of housekeeping points just quickly before I wrap things up. There is one final poll. Would just like to get some feedback from the audience on today's session. But I really did want to thank firstly TiE Dubai for hosting this webinar today on such an important topic. I don't come from a legal background, but I have been impacted by legal technology, and it really is something that does affect everyone. And we had such a stellar group of panelists. Thank you so much, Mimi, Jamie, Rishikesh, and Dilip. Great to have you participate. As always, I really hope that we can do allows us to do so. Dilip, would you like to, I'll hand over to you. I know you like the closing word.
No, I just want to thank this brilliant panel for helping us with some of our investment thesis. We were definitely cheating and we were using your intelligence to come to some conclusions. So thank you, TiE, for allowing us to do that. Thank you all. And, you know, I'm sure we'll all be together again in this virtual atmosphere sometime soon. So thank you.